Welcome to Leadenhall Consulting and welcome to Back to Life, Back to Reality. This webinar focuses on the return to work, and we have 4 Chief People Officers who will be speaking about their experience, their decision making and their thoughts on the return to work and the new working patterns that are a result of that. Just a quick introduction to ourselves. We were founded 10 years ago in 2011. We're celebrating our 10th anniversary. And we started off in financial services, but we've broadened the areas in which we provide services to other sectors. We're very much international. We do have about half of our 50 coaches in the UK, but the other half are available from the US through the UK and Europe to Asia and to Australia. And we pick our coaches, and I say pick, we choose our coaches and they choose us, based on their experience of business, their experience as coaches, and their qualifications. And we make sure that we have coaches who can really add value to the coaching process. And we've, in the last year or so, launched Coaching on Demand, which we developed and built just before the first lockdown, which was pretty timely and pretty lucky. And our coaching platform enables us to offer the same coaches globally, but at a more economic price. So high quality coaching at a slightly disrupted price, which enables more people to access coaching. For today, we have 4 speakers. I've already mentioned them. Sally Nelson, who's the Chief People Officer for Fidelity International. Paul Hucknall, who's the Group People Officer for Quilter PLC. Nicola Harris, who's Chief People Officer at Unispace, and Peter Walmsley, who's Chief People Officer at GSN Games. 3 of those CPOs are based in the UK, 1 of them in Boston. All of them have international businesses and look at this question from an international perspective. And this is the timings that we're anticipating. Return to the office. There are very different approaches, and we're reading about this in the media almost daily, from Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley and JP Morgan, effectively pushing hard to return to the office on the old model. Other companies embracing hybrid working, different solutions. I've added in here Fidelity International's coverage and Propeller Offices, which is Unispace's response to how do you use the office in a different way going forward. So I think the question for which way forward is, is hybrid working a short-term situation, but there will be pressure to return to 5 days in the office, and in 2 years' time we'll all be saying, well, what was all the fuss about? Will there be substantial differences around the world? And the Chief People Officers we have speaking today have international offices, and they don't see it just from a UK perspective. There are different responses in different countries. There'll be questions around what happens to international travel. There'll be differences between industries. And will there be winners and losers with this new ways of working from a commercial point of view? And I'm quite interested in whether the economics of hybrid remote working will disrupt the cost of business. Will some companies get a huge advantage from this versus others? And will those with economic value gravitate to firms who offer flexibility? So actually, is flexibility going to be a talent magnet or the reverse? So I think they're the kind of issues that we're seeing in the media, and I think we're all quite intrigued to know. So our first speaker, and I will ask her to speak very shortly, is Sally Nelson. Sally and I worked together many years ago. She is the Chief People Officer for Fidelity International, and she holds numerous positions across the Fidelity operations, including being on the Remuneration Committee of Colt, which is owned by Fidelity, and 8 Roads, which is a private equity business that Fidelity invests through. She's had a great career at Fidelity, and she's a trustee on the board of Future First, an education charity. And Sally started her career as a teacher, and so she has a background in education. And she graduated from King's College London, and I noticed as I was preparing bios that that's true of at least one of our other speakers today. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen. I'm going to ask Sally to introduce herself and talk for several minutes on how Fidelity are responding to this new situation and the future of work for their organisation.
Thank you very much, Chris, and hello everyone. It's very nice to be invited to be part of this discussion. One of the roles I have at the moment in Fidelity as Chief People Officer is to be a co-sponsor of our Future of Work group that we've had going on since back end of last year, thinking about, you know, what should the workplace of Fidelity when things open up properly really be looking like. Fidelity, for those of you who don't know us, we are a provider of investment and retirement expertise. We deliver that across institutions, individuals and advisors. When I first joined and when I first got to know Chris and actually Liz, there were only 3,000 employees in the organization, and there's now over 9,000, and we're in 27 different operating locations. So you can imagine, as we're thinking about the future of work, we've been grappling with lots of complexity, not least the dispersion of a geographical footprint. So I thought I'd tell you really about the journey that we've been on and our story. So probably like many other firms, when the world went into lockdown as a result of the pandemic in the early part of last year, we actually found ourselves with 97% of our employees on a worldwide basis able to quickly and successfully work from home, thanks to a really incredible rapid rollout of collaboration platforms such as Zoom and Teams that we actually already had planned, but and some rollout was partially underway, but we really had to accelerate that. So we've also been deliberately moving away from virtual desktop infrastructure to laptops. So one of the innovations coming out of recent times is to create this office in a box solution for new joiners that's now sent to them at the point of joining, so that they have everything they need to work flexibly from the very beginning of their career with us. So technology is really, I guess, gave us the genesis of our approach to hybrid working, which we've called, as Chris mentioned in the opening slides, dynamic working, because we realize that technology is such a key enabler to more flexibility in the future when the world opens back up. So our philosophy around future of work is to have trust-based principles, and in mid-March we unleashed these across the organization. We told our employees that dynamic working at Fidelity will be just that, this incredible flexible combination of both home and office working. We've not been able to trial out as much of the office working as we'd like, but we definitely feel it's going to be important. And that with that in mind, it's really essential we strike this right balance in the working patterns of the future, so we can make sure that it works for our employees, co-workers, business, and of course, most importantly, our clients. So in going out to talk with our employees, we've been really emphasizing that the workplace, we feel, is still this important part of creating a corporate culture, because it's important for new people to understand the way things are done around here at Fidelity. So, you know, you've got to experience a little bit about life on the inside of an office as well as virtual life, which is, for some of our joiners, I think we've onboarded more than 1,000 people over the last year, as being totally virtual. Maybe in the last few weeks, some people have been meeting for the first time. But this culture is particularly important when you're onboarding people and doing initial training. So we know we want to return to that when we can. It's also important for the staging of some meetings and events, whether internal or external. And we feel that collaboration and networking, for this to naturally occur, you need to create opportunities for people to come together in real time in the office. But we've also been saying that if people in the new world want to work in the office 5 days a week, then that's fine too. So we've developed tools to book spaces and connect when in the office. And we've got this proprietary workplace app that we've developed in-house through our tech team. And this app allows people to see when colleagues are in the office that they might be interested in connecting with. It also allows them to book space, whether that's a desk or a collaboration area. and hopefully it will give people the opportunity to plan things going forward. We've also been quite clear with our employees from the real beginning that dynamic working is going to be an iterative process. So we absolutely know we don't have all the answers, partly because we're not experiencing what dynamic working really means in practice across all the locations. So we've been quite honest with people to say, you know, we've all been learning a lot, so let's continue the learning journey. And we've told people that we'll give them the support in how they need to think about how to balance all these elements in the future. So we've given them allowances, for example, to buy pieces of kit that might help them work more comfortably when outside of the office, a mouse, a keyboard, a headset, an additional screen, even a chair at times if they've thought that that was going to be important. And we've also implemented health and safety self-assessments that they can carry out at home to really ensure that they're thinking about how to make the working environment safe. When we've surveyed our employees, more than 80% of them have repeatedly told us that they're happy with this middle ground of hybrid working. They ideally want some time in the office, but also they want to preserve this new way of working, this more remote working, flexible working that they've actually been, you know, experiencing the last year. So we're still figuring out what the ideal balance might look like, but we feel through discussion groups that we've had that on average we might see between people in the office between about 2 to 3 days a week, or more loosely we've sort of framed it as 4 to 12 days in a month. But it could be more, it could be less, and any given week will be different in any event. We're also considering some roles being fully remote to address skills gaps, for example, and also for some D&I considerations. But we're saying where possible, because we think coming into the workplace is important, that that's going to be at the heart of everything. And most of our roles have been mapped as hybrid. And there are some roles that have been mapped as fully in the office. You can imagine receptionists, you know, security roles, those types of things. And there's also, with our overseas footprint, some regulatory roles in places like India or Taiwan, where we don't have the choice about whether they are done in or outside of the office. We've realized that it's really important for us to look at both the location and the layout of the workspace of the future, as well as hourly work patterns. So we've done this role mapping I mentioned, and that's looked at all 9,000 staff. We've used our HR system to actually record what type of role, whether it's remote, office-based or hybrid. And almost 90% of all roles are deemed to be able to be done in a hybrid way. Although there are some roles that need to have a specific work pattern to accommodate the clients that they look after. We've also been looking at implementing more open plan, flexible collaboration spaces. So we've looked at furniture. We've had a pilot going on in one of the offices, and some of us have gone in and actually tested out some of the new furnishings and so on, with, you know, clever acoustic things in there. And we have looked at, you know, things like more interactive whiteboards and so on, so that this teamwork and brainstorming and innovation can happen. And there's also going to be lots of Zoom rooms where people, if they are in the office but they need some private space, or 2 or 3 need to jump on a call, can nip into an office and have that call. But also the desks are all being set up with headphones and an ability to, you know, Zoom from your desk. And that's probably one of the things in the new world that's going to be interesting, because at home people have got used to no noise, and all of a sudden you go into the office and you've got the buzz of people around you, and some people have found that really distracting. So, you know, we're kind of looking at all those things. So just before I finish, really, I guess throughout the rollout of dynamic working, we've tried to provide this idea of flexibility principles in a framework, rather than too much of a top-down approach. The senior management population have found this, you know, they're pretty comfortable, but more junior managers in particular, and perhaps our general employees, are looking for some guidance. So we've had to find this balance between principles and clearer guidance. So we're providing examples, case studies of how leaders are planning to implement in their teams and countries, what a typical working week for some types of teams might look like. And we've got a site with loads of Q&As and materials and different things, and we've run loads of webinars. So just to finish, our 3 dynamic working principles at Fidelity are: Principle 1, we will offer the maximum flexibility of home and office working, considering the role that you're doing, working effectively in teams and delivering for clients. Principle 2, we measure performance based on what employees deliver and contribute, not just on when you work your contractual hours. And Principle 3, we trust everyone will make sensible choices around how they work and be available to effectively collaborate with colleagues. So we're definitely on a journey, but we've made a start, and we're going to be iterating as we go and learning as we go. So that's our starting point.
Look, thank you very much for that introduction. Let me just come to the fore. That I've been making notes, and I will try and sum up towards the end, and I'd like to move on to our next speaker in a second. But there are some really interesting things in there, particularly the app, which sounds very innovative in terms of workplace management. 1,000 employees have joined since. I mean, that's a huge number of people to join the organization. And those 3 principles, I thought they were good principles, and I'm sure people will be jotting that down. We will put this video on YouTube, and so for those of you who thought there was some interesting stuff there and you missed it, you can circle back and hear what has to be said. In terms of our next speaker, Paul Hucknall. Paul is Chief People Officer at Quilter PLC. We did a little bit of work at Quilter, so I knew who they were, but they were Old Mutual Wealth Management. And so for those of us who have been around the city for many years, Old Mutual is probably the former title that many of us will know this group. But Paul's had a long career in HR, including periods at Lloyds Bank. He's worked at Bank of America, he's also the master of the Guild of Human Resource Professionals, which is how I got to know Paul. And actually, I will throw a quick advert in for those of you in HR who are interested in, and particularly those with access to London. The Guild of HR Professionals is something worth finding out about, certainly from a networking and getting to meet other HR professionals, in the city. So that's the introduction to Paul. Paul, I'm now looking for you.
I'm
here. If you'd like to speak, I'm going to pin you so that you appear.
Excellent.
And I'm going to say goodbye to my pin. And over to you.
Okay, thank you, Chris, and good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for the introduction. It's interesting listening to Sally quite how many similarities there are between the sorts of things that we've been thinking about at Quilter. Perhaps just start by giving you a little bit of information about who we are as an organisation. We're a wealth management organisation, so that spans advice, investments, and platform. We're predominantly UK focused, although we do have an international business. We've actually announced the sale of that international business, so we're in the process of completing that sale by the end of this year. Our employee base is about 4,500, and in addition to that, we have about 2,000 advisors in our network who are not employed by us, but who are essentially a part of our wider network. So about 6,500, the vast majority of which are in the UK, albeit spread all over the UK, with some international hubs in about 6 or 7 other locations. If I try to, I'll try through the course of this to pull out differences, if there are any, between what you heard from Sally, because our story over the course of the last 15 or 16 months has been very similar. We all also went to remote working. 95% of our population went to remote working within 2 weeks of lockdown. And that's in all our locations around the world as well. We also rolled out collaboration tools very quickly that were previously planned, but accelerated quite rapidly with some innovative techniques to deliver laptops to home addresses and get people properly set up. But one of the things that we were also doing, and this is pre-pandemic is that we had moved in 2019 to a weekly routine of employee engagement surveys, which when I first pitched that to the business was quite an interesting discussion. But what weekly surveys has done for us, and it's a very few questions, but the opportunity for real dialogue with our employees, we found, as you would expect, very real-time feedback, and we continue to get real-time feedback, which was particularly useful as we went into lockdown about ways of working. And I dwell on that because we've then used a lot of that as input into our ways of working, thinking for when offices are eventually reopened. The other activity we had going on as a coincidence was office relocations and office refurbishments. So we took the opportunity in 2020 to change actually how we were setting up those offices. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But our approach to the future of work, and we also call it the future of work, our approach to that has been very much principles based. So, like you've heard previously, there are those who would like there to be rules, and I do find it fascinating actually when I see those press articles that you flashed up earlier, Chris, the CEOs who are being super definitive about what the future of work will look like. There's only one thing I can be pretty certain of, and that's that they're wrong, because they think it's either one thing or the other. And I think as we all know, we are going to be learning over the coming months, and I think that confidence in knowing that we do not all know the answers, and that we do need actually to have lots of little tests and pilots going on around our businesses, I think is the biggest learning and perhaps piece of feedback we've had from our colleagues that we have tried to weave into our future ways of working. So among our 4,500 staff, we've also like Julie, like Sally, have asked our line managers to have conversations with their teams, and asked them to go through a relatively structured conversation that we've helped them to have about what the future of work looks like for that team. And we've also looked at roles across the organization and tried to identify those roles where there really is a need for frequent or even permanent office space, and for those where flexibility is possible. And then for the line managers of those teams to have the discussion with the individuals and with the team collectively to determine what might work best for that team. So our goal has been to have this operate as a lower level as possible in terms of management in the organization, to really put it at the in the hands of our managers. So one of the things that is true, and we've discovered certainly as a result of that, is the capability of our managers at all levels. Actually, I would add in our senior managers. In fact, the need for them to know how to deal with this and know how to have the conversations hasn't been there for good reason. They've not obviously been in this situation before. So we have put together, and we are rolling out a number of leadership programs, both formal and informal, to help leaders and line managers have the conversations that they need to have with their teams. And I think that's an important aspect, because there may be disagreement in terms of what the individual thinks that they would like to do and actually what the business might require them to do going forward. So the ability to have that conversation and get to the right answer that is a balance for both the individual and the business could in some circumstances be a tricky conversation. So we've worked with an organization called Future Talent Learning to help us build transformational learning programs for to help focus on agility, to help focus on the confidence to have conversations, to help leadership through ambiguity and transformation. In terms of the types of working, we will undoubtedly have three types, I think, in broad terms going forward. We will have those who are permanently based in the office, and that will be a minority, a small minority of our staff. We'll have roles that are permanently home-based or outside the office, and in fact, we have a number of those already. Before the pandemic even arrived, we had 500 employees of our total 4,500 who are on home working contracts. So we already had a pretty well spread, flexible workforce, and then the remainder will be in this what I consider and we think of as informal flexibility. And you asked the question, Chris, about the distinction, if there is one, between hybrid and flexibility. And the way we think about it is flexibility is the individual aspects. Hybrid is how we want teams to work together, whereby within a given team, we may find that some individuals are in the office, some individuals are at home, and it will vary. And it's about how those teams work effectively when they are split in that way. So going back to how we support people to do that, and we have been trialing this with a few of our offices where individuals have been in the office. There are some really practical things actually that people need to be thinking about. Sally also touched on some that we're looking at. So an app for desk booking and knowing who's in the office. We have not developed our own. We're buying one that somebody else has very cleverly developed. But it also comes down to practical tips on meeting protocols. And for example, how does a meeting take place when half of the participants are in the office and the other half are at home? And I think what we all would like to avoid is having 6 people who are all in the same meeting, sitting at their desks in the same office in London, and not having that personal connection that you get from a meeting, and all being on the Zoom because there are people who are also at home. So it's making sure that the office has benefits, has the benefits that it needs to have for productivity and for work. So we describe the office having previously all thought of it as the place that we go to do our work. We are trying to shift that culturally towards being the place that you go to for certain types of work, where those are better done either collectively in an office, or because the facilities that are provided help you to achieve your role more effectively. So that conversation is really what it's all about, and perhaps just drawing to a close. Lots and lots of similarities from what you've heard from Sally. I've sort of skipped a few of those because they are so similar, but it's good to know that we're thinking similarly. I think there are, as I've said, lots of pilots about to happen when offices reopen, and I would encourage all of us, I think, to embrace the uncertainty that will bring, the fact that we will be testing things and trialing them, and that's certainly the message we're giving to our people, and to not worry about the fact that whatever it is you're doing in week 1 may not work quite as you'd like, and it may be different in week 2 or week 10. And we'll encourage our managers to ensure that that's the case.
Brilliant, thank you, Paul. And that was very helpful. And I thought the point about using the office differently is incredibly important. I mean, it does seem a bit silly if you sit at your desk on Monday to do work, and then you go to a desk on Tuesday and do the same kind of work, and you're just sitting in a different place. There must be a way of working more effectively, which could be a nice lead in to Nicola. Nicola is Chief People Officer or Chief People and Culture for Unispace, and Unispace is a company who are overtly revolutionising the creation of workplace places in the yeah, in the office environment. That is what they do for a living. And so the difficulty for Nicola, of course, is that she now has to make sure that the people strategy aligns with the business strategy, and their model is called Propeller Working. And Nicola's going to share her thoughts on this. And Nicola, I've obviously got some slides for you. So maybe what I will do initially is to obviously stop sharing. But when you need a slide, just ask for it, and I will share. Nicola?
Perfect. Yeah. Thanks, Chris. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Cool. Okay, that's great. Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me to speak with the panel today, and sort of welcome to everybody that's joined the call. I think what's really fascinating about where we are right now is that we all have the same problem, and we all have a very similar situation, which is probably one of the first times that all organisations across different sectors have had to deal with the similar situation in quite the global way that we are. And sort of I think from my point of view, there's a number of things that we can kind of touch on here. I mean, as workplace strategists, designers and project managers, that's what we do. We do end-to-end service. We've got quite a vested interest in actually kind of encouraging people back to work. So we do want to continue designing and fitting out workspaces, because that's what we do. That is the essence of our business. But really the big part about what we can help with there is around sort of helping our organisations and our clients to really see how to use their real estate differently. I think as a HR professional, we've been talking to our managers, our leaders. I've certainly been in professional services for over 20 years, for 25 years. And the pandemic has accelerated what we knew already as HR professionals, is that you can manage a remote workforce. You don't actually need to see people to be able to kind of, know that they're being productive, and that you're, sort of delivering the activities that you need to deliver, and that you can empower people in a very different way. I don't think any of us would have wanted a pandemic to prove that point. But nevertheless, it's happened, and we are where we are, and we kind of have to deal with, the situation, and sort of think about how we kind of return to work. I have also done very similar things to both Paul and Sally in terms of things that we've been working with across our organisation. You'd argue and think that we would know how to do this well, because we have a lot of techniques that we're sort of talking to our own clients about. But at the same time, I think the really important thing here is about culture, well-being, and how you protect what is the essence of your organisation. So, referring to what Paul said earlier on about the examples Chris put up on the screen, I agree as well that, actually, I don't think they're right. I don't think this is a prescriptive approach. I don't think that's the right way. Forcing people back into the workplace is not the way to do it. It's about empowering, not being too prescriptive, but creating an environment where people want to come into the workplace. And to do that, it's about, what are they coming into the workplace to do? So to sit and do our emails, to sit and catch up on admin, to plan our week ahead, to do learning, to sort of, think, be creative. Those things, we might actually have a better environment that we want to do it in. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it's at home either. That might be working from a co-working space. It could be working from your client's space. It could be working in, your home environment. But it could be working from a cafe on the corner, whatever kind of suits you. And I think, to give an example of that, I mean, I'm actually at the moment in a house in Lymington on the south coast of England. I've been here, this is my 5th week of 6. And I took the decision in January that I didn't want to sit at my kitchen island for the next year. So to have a break away from home, I actually just thought I'll combine working in a different place. I can still get to London. I have been up to London from where I'm staying at the moment. It's actually my mother's 80th birthday today. We've been out for lunch. I am actually sort of on holiday this week and next week, but it's about blending work-life integration. It's not about necessarily seeing work as a fixed set of hours or a fixed environment. So again, to reiterate what Paul said a few moments ago, work is actually no longer a place, it's an activity. But more importantly, we're moving that more towards now being an experience. And actually, we want people to come into the workplace to really problem solve, innovate, create, and feel that collaboration is going to be something that is really worthwhile. Whereas at home or remotely, wherever that might be for you, whether it might be in the office. So, we opened our studio on the banks of the Thames back in July last year and left it open for people to go to if that's what they wanted. Because from a well-being perspective, some people couldn't work from home or didn't feel that they were being as productive. They might have had environments that weren't as conducive, to having a home office, for example. So we've, if you want to go into the studio, we have very smart sort of and very flexible workspace. And so if you want to work in a quiet room, you can. If you want to work at a desk, you can. But ultimately, it's about having that choice. So I will talk a little bit about Propeller and about sort of the framework in a moment. But one of the things that we've introduced literally in the last week is actually something called Your Day, Your Way, You Choose. So we're actually empowering our people to decide on how is it going to work for you. You know what you need to deliver. There are some roles, there will always be some roles where you do need to have more time in the office or a studio or in a specific environment because of the nature of the job. But otherwise, we're just going to really empower people and empower the managers then to create the reason to come into the workplace. So the emphasis is on the leaders to kind of think about the collaboration, the kind of the creativity. When we're working on a project for a client, there's nothing better than getting a team of people into the studio to be able to, kind of really think creatively about the client strategy, what they want to achieve from their workplace, how they can achieve that through the design and the, the creation of the environment that we will work with them on. But ultimately, that's down to the project lead to bring people together. But then when they go, off to the next stage of doing sort of a different part of their work, they may not need to do that in the studio. So Chris, should we pop onto the sort of maybe the first slide? I think that really, this slide really talks about sort of how we work, where we work and when we work. So we kind of probably talked a little bit about that already, but quite interested on the second slide, if you just want to pop straight to that one. This is about sort of the evolution of workplace and what's driven that change. So if we go sort of like right back to the 1890s, we're sort of starting with here, but then that jumps forward, really pretty much 100 years. The creation and the use of space was really driven by the space itself. So it was very cellular. Initially, there were offices, desks, people had kind of doors and shut their office doors and worked very seniority played a big part in that for many, many years. Sort of which office you were sat in or which floor you were on. And then we, all became sort of a little bit more open plan, and that started to really think about collaboration and working together. And, there was lots of research and studies about whether open plan was a good thing or not. Quite quickly, that evolution took 100 years, but then quite quickly over the next sort of 5 years, 10 years, we started to see the evolution really of technology, and technology has driven the way that we can work differently. I mean, again, Paul and Sally, you both spoke about how quickly you rolled out Teams and Zoom and Skype, and we did the same, and we mobilized that, kind of virtually overnight. But really the technology, that was all about activity-based working, and it started to drive a bit more agility and thinking about, I don't have to sit at a desk. Now, I worked at Ernst & Young when I first went into HR 20 odd years ago. I've never had a desk since, which is quite unusual probably for HR people, but I've always worked very closely with the business. And I know that if I need to go and work on something confidential, I'll have a private discussion, I know I've got space to go and do that. But I found it much more beneficial to actually work with what I see as my client. And that's the way I've encouraged my team to work. I also travelled a lot. I know a lot of us work in international organisations. So the idea of having a desk really hasn't appealed to me for the last 20 years. My desk really was my bag. And I sat on a train or a plane or an airport, and I worked wherever I needed to. So then moving forward, we went into that agility started to become much more kind of disruptive around projects. So people started to work much more collaboratively, I can't even say the word, and actually became much more sort of matrixed organisations. But now we're seeing the move in sort of that what we're calling Propeller. It's driven by people. So the empowerment of people and the way that you choose the way you want to work is actually going to drive how we will then evolve the workplace. And I think that's very much what we've seen happen over this last 12 months. We've been no less productive being at home for 15 months. But what we have missed is actually the social elements. So we've missed being together. We've missed, the opportunity to collaborate and innovate and problem solve together. And we've just missed the opportunity to kind of, we're very social animals. And whilst personality drives different ways of working, and we like quiet times on our own, depending on, sort of person we might be, what we are missing, I think, is actually that opportunity to come together and really enjoy being in the company of other people. And that's what drives our culture. So that's sort of, I think, where we see Propeller on the next slide, Chris. This is really kind of starts to talk about, we developed this at the very beginning of the pandemic, which was actually sort of really to talk about what are the different elements of usage that we have across a workspace in terms of focus, collaboration, socialization and learning. And then overlaying on that, the problem solving, the innovation, the community experience that we want to have. And what we're sort of now talking to our clients about is how can we help you to utilize your workspace to actually drive, kind of all of these different elements to work together. And that's how it sort of propels round. It's an ever-changing use of that space depending on the activity that you're doing. So I don't want to give there might be Q&A and we might be able to answer a few more questions about what we've done specifically, but I just want to give you a flavour for the way that we've worked, both with our clients and how we've translated that into our own organisation, and to supplement the discussion that's sort of already been shared and the experiences have been shared by Paul and Sally. Oh, Chris, you're still on mute.
I'm still on mute, thank you. So thank you, Sally. I think we will save, obviously we'll save some for the Q&A because I think we've burned through our time. Yeah. And so I'm now going to obviously introduce Peter. Peter and I used to work together many years ago at Colt Telecom. He has worked within the Fidelity's world too. But he's now Chief People Officer for GSN Games. He also worked for Electronic Arts, and he's certainly been very much an international HR person. And in the time that I've known Peter, not only has he worked in London, Paris, Madrid, he's been down to Geneva, he was over in San Francisco, and he's now in Boston. So one of the thoughts I thought would be very helpful from Peter is that sitting in Boston and also seeing the US experience, plus obviously his international experience, it would be very helpful and I think very useful to hear that perspective and see what Peter's seeing. So Peter, let me find you, or if you'd like to speak, I will get you pinned.
Yeah. Can you hear me okay? Yeah.
There you are.
Chris?
Yep, we can hear you. That's super.
Okay, great. Well, look, thank you very much. If I go back to the last slides that were just shown, I think you and I worked together in the cellular phase back in the 1890s, right? So this certainly feels as though we've known each other a long time. And yes, worked at Colt and obviously Fidelity as well. I'm now working for GSN Games, which, if you don't know anything about it, is very much around social and casino, mobile games and puzzle games, which if you look at the last year and a half, has really been at the most crazy time to be in games, because people have had a lot more discretionary time or have been looking for an alternative to work. And yes, the business has gone very well. We're wholly owned by Sony, which in part actually helped shape some of our thinking. And we're in the US, we're in the UK, we're in Spain, we're in Israel, we're in the Ukraine, and probably 50% of our workforce is in India. And pretty similar to everybody else, the way we've approached it, actually we do carry out a weekly risk assessment with all our locations, looking at the number of new cases, hospitalizations, community spread, death, lockdowns, etc. And so that will then determine how ready any of our locations are to be considered to return to work. And if I looked today, our US offices are Boston, San Francisco, and Mountain View, just down from San Francisco, are ready to open, and we will probably open at the beginning of probably after the holiday that's coming up, the 4th of July, so around about the 10th, 12th. Israel is now fully open, no restrictions whatsoever, because their vaccination rate is high. The UK, well, the UK is intriguing, as all of you will know, probably far more than I do. It chops and changes like the weather. And then Spain, Ukraine are probably a few months away. And then, as we all know, India is having a terrible time. We did many of the things that you guys talked about. We provided equipment for people to work from home. We were able, in a nanosecond, for people to work from home. What we weren't prepared for is so many people not wanting to show their home location because they didn't have equipment. They were sitting on beds or in corners. That's why we implemented a survey and put the equipment policy in place. So it's and one of the key things that we've done, I think, to keep people focused on career development is provide a lot more learning and development opportunities for people through various access to learning systems to continue their development. We did some remote coaching programs and really try to focus people on career development as well, as well as all the other things that people have talked about. So we're now at a stage where we're thinking about returning to work, to the office. What will that look like? Interestingly, because say in Boston, for example, all the restrictions are lifted apart from wearing masks on public transport. That's and particularly if you're vaccinated. So we're actually at a stage where we are considering going back into the office. Yes, there will be flexibility. Call it hybrid. We probably would call it more a mix of hybrid stroke flexibility, where people will be self-determining around how many days they would like to come into the office, and we will make the office available to them to enable them to do that. But interestingly, there probably won't be that much change in the office layout, but there will be a major focus on getting groups of people together for collaboration, innovation, networking, particularly with things like designing new games. But one of the challenges that we have, and I use India as an example, 230 people based in our India office, 40% of the workforce has gone back to their home location where they came from to look after their family. And the question for us is, well, what do we do? That, you know, we've proven that they can work from home and the business has been phenomenally successful. So how are we going to address that? And that's what we're trying to think through as well. We've also hired a lot of people here in the US, for example, who are not in Boston or not in San Francisco. So they are disconnected from an office location, but they need to be blended into our approach as we go forward. And then we've got people who've moved out of Boston 25 miles down the road because they, you know, getting a better quality of life, you know, but only want to come in 2 or 3 days a week. And then there are others who are just can't wait to get into the office because they'll probably be there 8 days a week if they could, to just after the year they've had at home. So we're trying to blend all of that together and think through an approach. And I think, like everybody has said, very iterative. We certainly in the US, it will almost, the look and feel of the offices will be no different probably to what it was 18 months ago. But it's just that I think the balance has shifted away from the employer driving to the employee indicating that, you know, my preference is to do 3 days or 2 days a week. And it's about us having the mindset to support that. Clearly, a lot of effort around management development, helping leaders to manage the balance between some of your people are going to be in the office, some of your people are going to be remote, some of your people are going to be in Northern Idaho, and how you're going to focus on performance and give people the appropriate feedback as well. And we haven't seen any gender bias, actually. What we have seen we have an average age of 34, apart from me. And what you see is there's no real attrition along gender lines. And what you see and you hear from talking to people is husband and wife, partner, whatever, trying to balance what their organization is doing around flexibility with what we're doing about flexibility, so they can cover the family unit in a way that works for them. And then, so therefore they will more likely to be engaged by organizations that enable them to continue to be flexible. So I think no one size fits all. We're going to get people back with a degree of flexibility. It will iterate and we'll see where we go from there. But certainly we are phased return in all of our locations and only when it's safe to do so. Back to you, Chris.
Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you very much. Now, we're now up for a Q&A. We have really burned through our time, so I think we only have a few minutes. But any questions to our 4 panelists that's on your mind around this return to work and how companies are handling it?
I've got one, Chris.
Hi, Des.
As you might expect. So I think I've really enjoyed listening to all of those insights and thinking sort of introspectively in a way about work and employees and management and so on. I'd be very interested to hear somebody's perspective on the views of the customers and whether customer behavior could actually undermine an internal perspective on what's right in inverted commas, or what could be the case. In other words, driving a need to be in the office for somebody that maybe doesn't want to be there, or alternatively, driving a need to be remote.
Good question. So who would like to take that? Perhaps just one person take a question. So a volunteer from our group. Sally.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, what's been interesting about the last year is the fact that, you know, all of our customers had to adapt to the new way of working as well. So company meetings and external meetings and, you know, client engagements all have happened through these collaboration platforms. And actually we've found that we've been able to run events and, you know, client webinars around with portfolio managers in the side of the asset management, talking and more accessible to more people. And of course, rather like this, it's been a great leveler in that, you know, everybody's got their individual tile, they can be seen, you know, you've got ways of enabling people to speak up. So I think we're open-minded about what happens next, and we've been very clear, and I think our colleagues understand this, that, you know, client comes first, and if the client wants to revert back, then that's fine. But I think we're going to find that there's a combination of new ways of working. I mean, there definitely will be some meetings that happen again back in house, but I think the breadth and reach that people have enjoyed, I think they'll probably want more of that too. So I think even that will be a blend.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? While people are thinking, I do have a burning question, which is the issue of gender, and I'd be interested in panelists' views on whether this is gender positive or gender negative. Positive that people will be more flexible, parents particularly, whether it be female or male parents, perhaps being able to better manage their work affairs through parenting and those middle years, or whether it will be gender negative and the guys, you know, will rush back into the office to keep their careers going, and that maybe females will find themselves either pressured or, you know, through their own volition, working from home and being in a less advantaged political position than being in the office. Do people, you know, that's been in the media, so I'm intrigued by people's thoughts about that. And anyone of you guys would like to answer that?
I think Chris, I covered it in what I said. Okay, no, I said I covered it, that we haven't seen any issue with that, and we're encouraging it. But I'll let Paul pick up.
Yeah, no, I was going to say a similar thing. Actually, we've certainly not seen any evidence of either way. I mean, I'm certainly an optimist, and I believe that it will be positive overall. And we've also, like a lot of companies, you know, we're taking steps to do things like equalize paternity leave with maternity leave and so on. And therefore, I think this will all help us step in the right direction. So I think it will ultimately be positive, but certainly no evidence of any impact either way at this point.
Maybe if I may, just one quick comment, which is, I think we've noticed that in the rollout over the last year of some of our parent-friendly policies that give the same rights to, you know, any parent, whether they're a female parent or otherwise, has meant that people have been taking that up and enjoying that flexibility. And the same goes with, there are fathers that have been telling me how the experience of working from home in the pandemic means they've bonded with their children and families and had more time when they're not commuting. So I think it's very much something that is going to evolve, but I think the demand, I keep using that word, is going to come from all sides going forward.
And if you think about things like the gender pay gap and leadership, less women in leadership, it may well be that this new hybrid working is going to make the environment much easier for parents as they try and juggle their responsibilities. There's some questions in chat. If people have to leave at 6, then please, I understand that you need to leave, and if you've got commitments, and that includes the panelists. I've got a question here from Valerie, which is thoughts on specific skills we will need to develop for hybrid working. Would somebody like to take that? Maybe that's one for you, Nicola, given the Unispace thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's interesting. We've been talking about this just this week with sort of a leadership development approach really that we're looking at with somebody that's worked really in the armed services. And the interesting kind of comment he made and discussing with my MD in the EMEA region was that actually these days, again, with technology driving a very different approach to wartime, you're never actually as a leader when you're at war with your team. So you're actually now, you are working very remotely, whether that be, kind of back in, say, the UK or you're sort of, could be thousands of miles away from the front line. But that is a very different approach to how, kind of the leading the charge might have looked if you were out there, sort of actually leading a group of soldiers effectively, sort of in that environment. So I think that the remote work, it's about trust. It's a lot about trust, a lot about being communication. You cannot over communicate in these sort of situations. And we did a lot of that. And I know, Paul, you mentioned your surveys that you did throughout the kind of early days of the pandemic. We were having virtually daily all hands calls within this region with sort of 200-300 people. Just to keep everybody connected and really sort of think about, sort of what does this mean, how people were, kind of quite scared about what it meant really for them as individuals or what it meant for us as a business. And we were keeping very much up to date with, what was going on and how we were keeping construction sites were open, which was a good thing for us. That's where our revenue comes from. But I think it really is going to be about trust, empowerment and communication. And those are the skills that I think are, sort of going to be the most important as we move forward.
Thank you very much. And a question for you, Sally, which is, it was Richenda who said, I like the Fidelity principles Sally shared. I'm curious how they were generated. How did you come up with those principles, Sally?
Yeah, I've just scribbled an answer in the chat, but effectively what we did is focus groups. So we actually had 2 workshops with 1,000 people using Mural, another platform that we've got used to, really just trying to drill down into what would be important about the workplace of the future, and some of the concerns, if you like, and challenges, particularly around things like how would you measure performance, and that's why we've focused on it's about outputs and outcomes rather than when you work your contractual hours. So that was something, in a given day in a dynamic working life that we've all been leading, people are choosing how they fit the work in around core hours. So it was really in collaboration with our workforce who were very participative and told us a lot about what they thought.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Just one final question and then we will wrap up. Adam Green asked around flexible work or flexible time working with early starts and late finishes, which can make moving items forward during the day challenging as fewer people are present. Any views on the practicalities of flexible working, timings, people being available, that kind of stuff?
Yeah,
well, I think
we've certainly seen that a lot. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Paul.
No, I was going to say we've seen that a lot. In fact, we positively encourage it. Actually, working the hours that suit you, the times that suit you, and I think it's part of this wider approach to to flexible and hybrid working. So we haven't seen any downsides to it. I mean, I absolutely take Adam's point that there could be challenges to it, but we haven't really seen evidence of that. I'd say the benefits have far outweighed the negatives.
Yeah, and I'd just add to that as well that sort of again, if depending on the geography that you cover, You know, we're a global organisation, we're very globally connected. A lot of our projects for clients are globally connected, and sometimes you are working very late, very early, and it is, you know, sort of about being very flexible around that. But one thing I saw this week, which I thought was interesting, is Amazon have introduced, or one of the people at Amazon had promoted on LinkedIn, I think it was called, I was just trying to look it up here, a truly human notice. And this is actually a footer on their emails, which says you may receive this email at an unusual time of day. And that could be because of the way that I am choosing work. It does not mean I'm expecting you to respond. The essence of the wording, it's longer than that. But that's something that, you know, I think we will be looking at introducing, is to say, look, you don't have to reply to this. I might just find it works for me to do these emails on a Sunday. Because of what I've done this week or whatever, but we don't expect you know, everybody to be, that's not a role model behavior, that's just what's convenient for you as an individual.
Well, thank you very much. I think we've burned through our time, and thank you to everyone for coming along, and thank you very much to our speakers. Just one final thing before we close. We as a business are looking to support people going back to the office, and in fact we have an idea to, and in fact we've already seen this happening in Australia and Sydney as people go back to the office, is that for some teams they're looking for a bit of support, and a coach who can facilitate that return can be very valuable, and look at some of the issues, help facilitate the conversations. Again, most leaders and managers, this is their job, this is what they should be doing, but actually I think for some teams a bit of external support to help facilitate those conversations would be valuable. So we've gone down that path of offering help. And finally, just two quotes to end the day. I thought these were both interesting quotes, and therefore I thought I would leave us on this subject. I can't tell you the number of CEOs I've talked to who are thinking, I have to solve the diversity challenge in my business, and remote work is one of the key tools. We have to let go of this very office-centric culture and incorporate people who are in lots of geographies. And we've heard a lot about that today. And then I thought the other one, which is a different angle, and is one of the secret benefits of using remote workers, is that the work itself becomes the yardstick to judge someone's performance. And again, maybe we're looking at the death of presenteeism. I don't know. Maybe that's a hope. But the real aim is for people to be able to deliver their work at a time convenient to them. So on that note, thank you very much, everybody, and thanks for coming along to the webinar. And thank you very much to all of our speakers, Paul, Sally, Nicola, and Peter. Thank you very much.